Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park, and we are here today with our second read of The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan. And I was curious, Jamae, so usually when I read books, I look past the material that I'm usually provided. In this book particularly, there's a map at the front. Sometimes I don't even read the introduction or the interlude or the prelude or things like that. How often do you end up reading that information or looking back on it or referencing it?
I read all the information at the beginning, whether it's the introduction, the letter from the author. Sometimes when it's a family tree or a glossary at the beginning, I still read all of it, even though I might not get the reference at the beginning, but I do use, even the maps, I do use it to reference where exactly I'm at, so it helps me form a frame of mind of who I'm reading about, as well as who is where at what time.
Right. So in this book, it's a map. It turns out being very useful, and I'll explain where that is within our read, but usually I don't look at this stuff. And I also think that translates into other parts of my life, which is like when I get a box of things, I don't look at the instructions. Do you look at the instructions when you get something?
So I read instructions to a fault. So it takes me a long time to get through anything. So if, for example, when I get a new phone, I tend to read all of the instructions to make sure I don't overcharge it. For another example is when I use a COVID test. I know how to use it. I've used it before, but do I read all the instructions? Yes, I do.
So what about like IKEA maps where there are no words, but you just look at all the little humans doing the little human things?
I look at every single thing first before I start, and that doesn't mean it translates to me putting it together any better. It just means that I read ahead of time.
So in a world where we're transitioning out of having instructions and material like that, does that make you angry?
No, it doesn't make me angry, but what it is really, it's not the fact that there is instructions that I'm looking for it, it's the fact that the instructions are present. So because it's present, the perfectionist in me is like, oh, somebody wrote this for me to read, so I need to read it.
Like someone put it in there for a reason, so I need to look at that reason.
Exactly.
What about like extended warranties and things like that?
So truthfully, yes, I used to read every single word. You know how in the bank, when they tell you that you need to read all the terms and services in order for you...
The terms and conditions?
Yes. The terms of services and the conditions in order for you to open a bank account. I remember one time when I was in a physical bank talking to a physical person and they told me that I needed to read through all of it. I literally read through all of it while that person was sitting there.
Nice.
Yes. But to answer your question, no, I don't read it anymore. Like I skim through the warranty, but I still read through all the instructions of anything.
So amongst the people that I know, I feel like I'm in the majority of what people tend to do, because generally laziness will outdo any form of meticulousness. I do find this to be a fault though, and this became much more aware to me when I was actually watching Game of Thrones, which seems like a very random reference, but when I was watching Game of Thrones, I didn't know this until someone told me that every intro scene was different per season because it was based off of where the events were happening within that storyline. And so you'd follow this map, and I always thought the map was the same, so I just skip introed every single time. I also hated cutscenes in video games. I would never watch those. I just wanted to get to the action.
For sure.
And then someone else brought up the fact that there was a lot of time spent on those cutscenes, and someone put in a lot of effort to not only detail this, but draw it out, then come up with a story idea so you could bind this all together. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, that was probably where most of the thought came with the production of this video game, or whatever it is that they wanted to build this beautiful story arc for the player. I think what I'm trying to do is be much more mindful of that and see all the material that's provided, because likely it's for a reason. Like the introduction in the story, which is a letter to the reader, was very beautifully written, and it tells exactly where her mindset was for writing this book.
Yes.
And I feel like that helped me get into the actual story of The Storm We Made.
Definitely. I think we're of two very extreme positions.
Mm-hmm.
I read every single thing to a fault,
Mm-hmm.
and you skip almost everything to a fault.
Yeah.
But I think where you're coming from is an efficiency point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't want to spend too much time lollygagging at the beginning where you don't need to be there, or you don't want to just continue looking back and forth when you probably already know where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Except when I am starting a project without looking at it. Like, we've done this with IKEA equipment.
Yes.
And I'll build it like halfway, and I'm like, oh, this is the wrong way. So it's not just the fact that the screwdriver fits into the screw. There is a reason why you have to follow blueprints or whatever it is. And I will look at those things, but I just don't think I look at them as much as I need to.
For this book, though, do you feel like the map has been helpful in any particular point?
Yes, and we'll get to that in the read.
Okay.
But before we do that, let's go over our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Wakoma Bookstore. They're a community bookstore located in Hood River, Oregon, and they're also known for hosting community events. You can visit them in person, or you can shop online at Wakoma Bookstore, Wakoma, W-A-U-C-O-M-A, bookstore.com. You can also learn more about their work via Instagram at Wakoma Books. Wakoma, again, is W-A-U-C-O-M-A.
Yep, and we follow their Instagram account, and the owner seems very kind and very sweet, so just supporting a local bookstore that is trying to do all the right things, it seems. So, yeah, follow Wakoma Bookstore.
And we hope to visit one day.
Yes, and that's going to be our recommendation for the week. Okay, so third read of The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan. I think I said second read at the beginning of this episode, but it's actually our third read. Third read of The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan. And in this read, we read pages 165 through 251 on the physical copy. And for everyone, that's going to be chapters 14 through 20. So what do we know so far about the story?
So far, we got to know a lot about the characters. We knew that Cecily got abandoned by Fujiwara, which made her very anxious. And then they all of a sudden came back with Lena.
Formerly Mrs. Yap.
Formerly Mrs. Yap. We also know that Abel was forced to unfortunately murder Brother Luke to escape the chicken coop.
Unalive Brother Luke.
Yes. And we also know that Jujubee gets angry at Jasmine, which then makes Jasmine run away and ends up with Fujiwara.
Right. And in this read, we do have some content warnings. So within this, we do have another instance of murder. We continue to see alcoholism. There's child abuse still involved. And there is some sexy time.
Consensual sexy time.
Yes. Also references to non-consensual, not so sexy time.
Right.
But let's talk about the story. So I kind of wanted to start with Abel because I thought that was a big enough storyline that still seems separate from everyone else's story.
Abel is unfortunately still in the concentration camp, and like we alluded to earlier, there is a scene where people murder somebody.
Right. But not only that, I thought it was very interesting that Abel's story started off with a strong reference to his first instance, which is him killing Brother Luke inside of the chicken coop. I was wondering, because we were distanced from his story enough through the other reads, that it's not that I had forgotten that he killed Brother Luke, but it was more so the fact that I had gotten over the brutality of the scene. But within the very first section of this read of Abel's story, we're prominently reminded of how not only did Abel kill Brother Luke, but how distraught he was over those instances.
Right, exactly. Which then leads Abel to being completely blocked off from the world because of his alcoholism.
Right, as he's purposefully doing so.
Right.
In this read, we see that the story progresses with Freddy becoming a stronger and stronger human and a stronger character.
Right, and he's become a leader to the boys.
Right, which works out well, except for the fact that I don't think he fully knows how to care for Abel. The issue is he's also a child.
Right.
And he's trying to do right by Abel.
Right.
And the way that he chooses to do that is by delivering Master Akiro onto a platter for Abel to do what he may, which Freddy at this time thinks Abel might get resolution from being able to get back at Master Akiro, which in this case means killing him.
Right, and not only resolution for what he's done to Abel, but I think Freddy's thought process was that not only will he get that resolution, but he'll also be able to resolve his nightmares about the chicken coop.
Right, exactly. And this is the reference to what Master Akiro did to Abel. And what we see in that instance where Abel is confronted with this situation is that Abel doesn't want to do this either. And he never wanted to kill Brother Luke.
No.
From Abel's perspective, he says that he did it for Freddy.
Exactly.
From Freddy's perspective, he wants Abel to be able to clear his conscience by ridding the world of the thing that reminds him of all these negative instances.
Right, exactly. Unfortunately, that's just not it. That's not it for Abel at all.
Right. So, once again, peer pressure drives hard. And Abel's in the scenario where he's surrounded by all the other children. He is then pressured to the point where he goes through with the act of getting rid of Master Akiro.
No, actually, the boys kill Master Akiro because Abel was so distraught that he didn't want to go through with it, and he runs away, throws up at the banana tree, and while the boys are doing the...
I do remember that, because I remember Abel talking about hearing like the bones cracking and things like
Exactly.
that. I thought that when Abel was standing over Master Akiro and the reference was made that he recalled the instance of Brother Luke and all that stuff, I thought he had recreated those instances with the rebar, but holding the stick instead of the rebar.
I don't remember him holding anything. Maybe Freddy was holding something.
Right. I thought Freddy had given him the weapon that Freddy wanted him to use.
I see.
So this is where maybe I got confused and I didn't fully understand it well.
That's fair.
But later in our read, we do get the reference back to this point where Abel confronts Freddy and says, I can't believe you think that I wanted to do that. So with then Abel not going through with committing this murder, it is very telling as to the turmoil that's going on in his brain.
Right, exactly.
So this then goes on to what happens next, which is Freddy now taking over the camp. Freddy is still trying to help Abel as much as he can, and the other boys are too.
Exactly, because of Freddy's command. Right,
and Abel sees that this is more pity than another form of caring, and he hates this as well.
Right. There is not only Freddy's rise to commandership, but there's this restlessness that's happening in the camp due to disappearing soldiers. There's no one really looking after them anymore or actually supervising them at this point.
Yeah, and so what's happening next is they're getting ready to leave the camp. So this is where the map in the beginning of the book came in handy to me. Because I kept thinking, where are they? I know that they wrote that it's the Kanchanaburi camp. I hope I said that correctly. But we know that they're at that camp, but in my mind, I didn't really connect it with a location. So, because I was thinking, where do they need to go and how far do they need to travel? Because they're packing up all this food.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, is it 10 miles away? Is it a mile away? Because Malaysia or Malaya it's a big space in terms of an overall country.
Yeah.
But I still feel like, it's manageable. Like, you can probably get through Malaya with a certain amount of walking. What I find out from looking at the map, though, is that they're not even in Malaya.
No.
They have to go through a lot.
They have to go through an entire country before they even get to Malaya.
Right. So, looking at the map, there's also a key for the distance that they need to travel. And so I was trying my best to somehow measure this out. And so as the crow flies, it's over 1,200 miles. It's maybe closer to 1,300 miles. And that's if you're cutting through the ocean that's there. So in actuality, what they have to do is not only go around that curvature of the Isthmus of Kra, but the topography of the actual map looks like most of it's mountains.
Yes.
So they're going to probably be traveling, 1,400 miles, probably more, through mountainous ranges. So going up and down, which is even more mileage.
With so little rations, too.
Yeah. I don't know if they know where they are, because obviously they were kidnapped and taken there.
Yes.
I don't know if they have cars or vehicles to transport them across this whole range.
Yeah, but even if they did have cars and vehicles, I don't know if they'd know how to use it.
Right. It's a little terrifying. I
Mm-hmm.
don't really know what the plan is going to be.
Right, besides walking in some direction.
Right. So that's where the story leaves us off with Abel and Freddie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious with where they decide to go with this story.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I don't know, it's a very long journey.
Exactly, and we're already past the halfway point. We're past the 3/4 point as well.
Right.
And we're just starting this journey.
Right. So that's them. But the other stories are within Jujubee, Jasmine, and Cecily.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the read, we do get 2 chapters from Jujubee this time around.
With Jujubee's read, people are caring for the Alcantara family.
Mm-hmm.
They're searching for Jasmine, they're giving them food, they're trying to comfort the Alcantara family while this is all happening.
Mm-hmm.
But what Jujubee notices is that it's shorter lived than when Abel went missing.
Mm-hmm.
People go back to normal, they don't really do anything more. And so Jujubee herself goes back to her routine, goes back to the tea house.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but the caring stops and the gossip starts. So what we see is the society that I feel like we see often in especially Asian communities, but I think within all communities, where there is that initial burst of concern. How do we get this person better?
Right.
How do we care for this person? And then, yeah, like Jujubee was saying, after a little bit, the initial emotional shock dies off, and then comes the, okay, so what's happened? What happened in that household? Why does this little girl feel like she needed to run away?
Exactly.
And then people start to judge.
Yes, for sure. And one of the breaks in Jujubee's routine is Mr. Takahashi.
Right. So we see a lot of Jujubee reflecting on her past life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the comparison of how she used to find relief versus right now where she needs that relief.
Right.
So one of the things that she used to do is to go find that storm drain. And within the storytelling of the storm drain, we get the different perspectives of all the children and how they used to play around. So I think this was the instance where we get to see what the world used to be like before the chaos then ensued.
Mm-hmm.
So we find Jujubee going back to the storm drain for comfort,
Yes.
but this time around, she is pulled out of it by Mr. Takahashi.
And Mr. Takahashi brings Jujubee in and tries to care for her. And caring for her looks like giving her tea, cleaning the house, and he feels the need to clean the house because of the sliminess from the treat and the oil mixing together around the kitchen.
Right, and this is from the chaos of Cecily going in and breaking things with the emotional outbursts of her losing Jasmine.
Right, right.
We see Jujubee's emotional outbursts as much more quiet,
Yes.
as much more caving in on herself.
Right.
And this is where Mr. Takahashi is trying his best as someone that doesn't need to do this to then take care of Jujubee.
Right, which makes me wonder what his intention is.
Right.
And I mean, like, he already knows that his daughter is well.
Right.
So, in my mind, I'm wondering, is he thinking that Jujubee is an extension of his daughter or, like, one of his children now?
Right, and that's where I hope that is what it is Mr. Takahashi sees Jujubee as someone that he wants to care for and he wants to take care of. We don't really know his true intentions. What we do know is that when Mr. Takahashi does bring up his daughter and Jujubee hears of Ichika, we know Jujubee's response isn't happiness or joy. It's much more on the side of what I think is jealousy.
Right, jealousy and a little bit of anger. And
a lot of anger.
And I think she holds a lot of the anger back, or at least tries to on the inside, while bringing out a front of nonchalance.
Right, and in a form of caring. Like, she wants Mr. Takahashi to believe that she cares about his daughter as well. But because we're seeing this from a first-person narrative, we understand the turmoil that Jujubee has and how much she hates his daughter for purely nothing. Like, there was no reason for Jujubee to hate Ichika. there's no reason for her to hate Mr. Takahashi because they did no wrong upon her.
Mm-hmm.
The wrong that was done upon her was by the empire of the Japanese.
Exactly. But she equates the empire to these individuals.
Right. So towards the end of this read, we see not only everyone else going back to their normal roles, the Alcantara family no longer being the spotlight of whatever gossip or everything that's going on in the city. And then we also see Jujubee having to go back to her mundane chores, going back to work, all the tasks that she needed to do before, with the knowledge that Jasmine is still out there missing. So yeah, that's where the read was with Jujubee. There wasn't a whole lot of progression. There was the storytelling of her emotions.
Something that we do see in Jujubee's end, towards the end of her chapter, is that Mr. Takahashi no longer has work for himself. And he no longer has a routine. So he's coming in whenever he can, rather than at his usual time in the past.
Right.
And so it kind of ends, to me, like a sour note, because Mr. Takahashi visits Jujubee. He reads to her the letter that he gets from Ichika, shows a picture, and then leaves without asking for Jujubee's well-being.
Right.
Which is different from how he's treated her before. Before, he's walked her past checkpoints. He's taken care of her, like we just mentioned. But in this particular instance, this is where I get confused at Mr. Takahashi's intention, because now it seems like he doesn't care what she has to say.
So you see this as a turning point in the relationship of Mr. Takahashi and Jujubee.
Yes, exactly.
And primarily in the form that Mr. Takahashi now no longer cares for Jujubee.
Yes, because Ichika is completely fine and is communicating with him.
Interesting. So we'll bring that back up towards the end when we do our discussion. But let's talk about Jasmine. And really, there's not a whole lot to talk about with Jasmine.
Not in this section, because there's no point of view chapter with Jasmine, although Jasmine is being talked about through specifically Jujubee and Cecily's points of view.
Right. And I think we learned the most about Jasmine through Cecily's story.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. One thing we find out about Cecily's story is that you were right in the last read in that Cecily and Fujiwara never really had a relationship. A
physical relationship.
Yeah, sexual relationship.
Right.
Until this point in this read.
Right. Since Fujiwara reappeared with Lina, or former Mrs. Yap, since reappearing, Cecily and Fujiwara have now begun their clandestine meetings again. And within those clandestine meetings, they have their first sexy time.
And that's only the start. So it's not like they only had a one-off instance. Even though seemingly Cecily isn't that into it, she still does it. Like, it seems like a chore that Cecily has to do.
Right. It seems like she has that fire and need for him, but then all of a sudden, when they're actually doing the deed, she's not happy with how it's going.
Right. It didn't meet the expectations that she was hoping for. It didn't meet the fiery lust that she was originally seeing from Fujiwara choking her out in the hotel room.
Right. This kind of reminds me of Killing Eve. For those who have watched the show or haven't watched the show, maybe this is more important to those who haven't watched the show. Eve herself is not turned on by Vanilla.
Right.
Instead, she wants to be afraid. She wants to feel the authority from the other person. So that's what it reminds me of. Cecily seems to want that authority figure in their relations.
Right. And the reason this becomes important is that Cecily becomes pregnant. But we have no idea if it's General Fujiwara or if it's from her husband,
Gordon.
Right. So that is the big conundrum in this, is that neither can she go to Fujiwara and say, this is your child, you need to take care of her, nor can she honestly go to Gordon and say, okay, we still have all of our children from your sample products.
Oh, no.
But the other part of this story is that Cecily has now found a very good, trusting, loving friend.
Yes, she builds a strong relationship with Lina, who is Fujiwara's wife.
Right. Who also ends up becoming pregnant.
At the same time.
Who we I think no is Fujiwara's, unless there's something else going funny with
I don't think
Lena.
so. I feel like Lena is true to her husband.
I think so too. So we know that Lena is pregnant with Fujiwara's child. We see instances within this read where possibly Fujiwara is more caring for Cecily than he is for Lena. But on the other side, we see the relationship blossom between Lena and Cecily.
Right. They become almost sister-like with each other.
Right.
They kind of lean on each other to get through all of the social activities, but also in order to escape those social activities.
Right. I think what happened between their relationship is that Cecily finally got to see the mask being taken off Lena. She finally got to see the person that wasn't hosting parties, that wasn't acting as a specific wife, that wasn't putting on this masquerade of being the perfect person in society. And Cecily fully respected that. There are moments in this read that Lena comes through in a very big way to take care of Cecily. And I'm pretty sure that weighs heavy on Cecily's betrayal of Lena.
I think Cecily is less feeling like a traitor to their relationship, but more compartmentalizing her life in that way. At least that's what I feel when I'm reading.
I see this as Cecily being a very selfish person.
Oh, yeah.
So I do think she has concerns about Lena and her feelings, but I don't see regret in the actions that Cecily did. I think Cecily's thinking about herself. I think she's thinking about how wonderful the advancement of the Japanese empire would be because she helped lead it.
Yes.
Because she was the one to tell Fujiwara to do this. So it comes from a very narcissistic place. Not to mention, this is all happening while her children are at home and she's not really taking care of them. Like, she's going back home to let them in. She's doing the things that need to be done. But it doesn't sound like she's doing it with the thought of really raising them and being there for them.
Exactly. She is living off of this power and authority that she feels by being quote-unquote equals with Fujiwara when they're talking about the insult that she's bringing him.
Right. And we see this in one of the early reads where, and this is a quote, she missed being a woman who cared about something, missed being a woman who was more than just an extension of her house and family. So to her, which is okay, like, her primary motivation for the things that she does isn't her family. And once again, that is fine. That is okay. But I feel like that should be agreed upon by the party of which she is a part of. Like, her family wasn't like, oh, go out there, Mom. You can leave us at home.
You can play spy if you want to.
Exactly. It was her decision to go forth with this. And in the earlier reads, we see that Jujubee has to clean up the mess of what Cecily leaves behind.
Exactly. Which is unfortunate for Jujubee and unfortunate for Gordon as well, who knows nothing.
Right. And that's where we leave off with the story. We are still in this area of not knowing. The story continues to advance at a pretty rapid pace.
It is going by really quickly.
I thought there were some very important parts of this read, though, that reference to the climax of the story. So within Cecily's read, I think she had 3 or 4 chapters within this.
She had, I think, 3.
3. We saw a storm brewing in Malaysia throughout this whole read. We saw it getting worse and worse. It then talked about as the storm got worse, it made it harder for her to come back home.
Yes.
Then there was a scene where she gets trapped outside of her fence. The storm was so strong that it knocks her back and knocks her out.
Right.
So I looked at this read as the storm finally coming into play. And as Cecily's life got more tumultuous, so did the storm. It seemed like a representation of how Cecily's life was getting worse and worse.
Getting out of hand.
Exactly.
For sure.
I also saw the storm being played out within each character. And what I mean by that is the title of the book is called The Storm We Made. Each character has kind of ended up in this position on their own. Not maybe completely on their own, but let me explain. So let's start off with Jujubee's character, right? Jujubee is in this place where her heart is breaking because Jasmine has left.
Yes.
But it was her actions of pulling Jasmine into that basement, trapping her in there, that made Jasmine leave.
Right.
So this was the storm that Jujubee had made. Jasmine is now in this space that we don't know if she's in harm or not, but she is in this space on her own in this house with a person that she doesn't know. She is putting herself in danger with her friend Yuki.
Right.
Because she has chosen to do that. Abel's story within this read, we see that he grew up as a character who defied authority. Mm-hmm. He consistently went against the normalcy of what was expected of him.
Right.
And both not deciding to build a railroad, talking back to the soldiers that were in charge, put him in the chicken coop. Then he decided to drink the mixture of alcohol that he did.
Right, the toddy.
And now he's in the position of being weak, feeling like he's being left behind and being pitied. Mm-hmm. And then with Cecily, all of this stuff of deciding to go with Fujiwara, deciding to leave her family, deciding to have the relationship with Fujiwara, and I'm going to say backstab Lena is a part of the storm that she's now creating.
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure that's going to come back and bite her in the tush.
Absolutely. I totally agree with all these storms that have been made by each character. Mm-hmm. Do you think any of these storms get resolved?
I don't know. And that's what I'm afraid of. We're nearing the end of this read. Mm-hmm. I feel like Jasmine coming back resolves a lot of things. I feel like if she's able to come back home safely, I think a lot more people are feeling better. But I don't know if that happens.
Right, because we are at the end of the story pretty much. Mm-hmm. And Jasmine, at least in my point of view, I thought she would be home a lot sooner.
Yes.
But she is still out and about.
And we don't know what's going on with her.
We don't know what's happening. Abel, like we mentioned earlier, is still far, far, far away from Alaya. Mm-hmm. And he's definitely not strong enough to make that 1,200 to 1,300 mile trek.
Right.
So do you think either of them ever come home? Jasmine and Abel, I mean.
So I don't know, but my guess, especially on Abel's story, is that he doesn't. Even if he does, his life is no longer the same.
Right.
He is no longer going to be the same person. He can't be happy-go-lucky. It's the same thing we saw in A Tiny Upward Shove, and we talked about her death.
Right. Being a mercy.
Exactly. Is how do you live after everything you've seen? We see how he's trying to live right now, and it's by binging on alcohol and trying to resolve the situation by forgetting.
Right.
The only thing that's really keeping him up is Freddie. So him coming home, whether he makes it or not, still doesn't seem like a resolution.
Absolutely.
I don't know if he makes it home, and I don't know if that becomes the thing that you want. If I'm Cecily or if I'm Gordon, if I see Abel coming back in that shape, I'm not happy either as a parent. So then, yeah, where does that lead the family at that point?
Totally.
Do you think that they're going to make it back home?
I think, and this gets into predictions, I think nobody's story gets resolved at this point because there's so little left. Well, one, there's so little left, and two, the trajectory of the story seems like nobody is going to find a happy ending.
Right. I can fully see that. Once again, the title of the book is called The Storm We Made, not The Storm We Resolved.
Or the storm that finally stopped being a storm.
Yeah, the pitter-patter
the pitter-patter of rain.
Yes. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. This just might be one of those reads where a lot happens, and that's what we have to live with.
Yeah, exactly.
But we won't truly know the ending until we get there, and that's going to be our next read. So what are we reading next?
For those of us who are reading the physical copy, that's going to be pages 252 to 334. And for everyone, this is chapters 21 through 25, the end of the book.
Yeah, and that's only 4 chapters then.
It's only 4 short... Nope, take that back. That's 4 long chapters.
Right, which Cecily's chapter in this book was very long. Well written, just long. But if you have any thoughts, if you have any feelings that you want to share, how can people reach out to us?
Y'all can email us at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com, or you can join the conversation on Instagram at asianbookclubpod.
Yep, and we also have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, which has our bookstore, where we have our past books that we've read, future books that we plan to read, and books that we recommend.
And a great way to support this podcast is to rate, review, and subscribe.
Yep. Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat.
Bye.
Bye.